The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So right now I'd like to introduce the presenter, Lynn Ackerman. Lynn is Sensight's Chief Customer Officer. She has a doctoral degree in experimental psychology with a self-proclaimed concentration in data storytelling and exceptional customer service. Dr. Ackerman got her feet wet learning how to delight and retain senior living residents and staff, as Senior Market Research Analyst for Altera Healthcare Corporation, which was acquired by Brookdale Senior Living in 2005. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lynn Ackerman.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning and afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. The team here at Sensight, we're delighted to be here, and we have been measuring employee engagement for about 15 years now, and we're really excited to be sharing some of this information back to you today, and also hopefully giving you one or two at least ideas that you could walk away with and implement in your own community or communities. So today's webinar will answer 3 questions. I'm sure most of you have heard about employee engagement before. I don't know how much you know about employee engagement, but you may be thinking, what's the deal with this? So here's what we want to do today. We want to answer the questions, why should I care about employee engagement? What does an engaged employee look like? And how can I engage my employees in my senior communities? So I get it, you're very busy. Some of the people on the line today, you may be executive directors, you may be managers of other departments within a community, you may be directors at the regional or division level of a larger company, you might even be at the corporate office in a management role or in HR, for example. And I know you're really busy. Directors, you're dealing with call-offs on a daily basis, paperwork, people coming in and out of your office, meetings, interviews, etc., the million other tasks you have to accomplish. So how in the world do you have time for employee engagement? And furthermore, why should you care? Well, here's one reason that understanding and implementing measures to improve engagement should really make a difference in your communities. So according to McKnight's, the average turnover rate in our industry is about 42%. And this figure is just an average, and assisted living turnover rates can bounce around from anywhere between 21 and even up to 135%, depending on a variety of factors. And when turnover happens, it's expensive, as you well know. There are costs of job posting and drug screening and background checks, orientation time and materials, training time, costs of covering that position by overtime pay and premium labor. And if the person happened to leave because of an injury, there's workman's comp, legal fees, other employees leaving for one reason or another. So as we all know, a fully staffed house runs more efficiently and it costs less and it saves you time. So last fall, I was at the SHINE conference, which is an HR senior care summit here in the Chicago area. And a gentleman named Dwight Cooper, who's the CEO of PPR Talent Solutions, provided us with some data about the true cost of turnover in senior living, which was more detailed than anything I had ever seen before. He worked with a single client and spent lots of time measuring all of their direct and indirect costs of turnover. And then he rated different communities as A players, B players, and C players. And what he found is that when you're looking at A players, these that I have presented here on the screen are your costs for replacing a CNA, an RN, or a director of nursing. So depending on a variety of factors, it could cost anywhere between $3,500 and $6,000 to replace a CNA. It could be $13,000 to up to $26,000 to replace an RN. And the cost of replacing a director of nursing could range wildly from $20,000 to $120,000. So this is why obviously it's better to keep your staff members rather than having to replace them. And staff members who are engaged in their work and invested in staying with their community obviously has a positive effect on retention. So this is why engagement is important. So now what about the what? Okay, so let's start with a poll. Andrea, you could launch the poll now.
Okay, the poll is launched.
Okay, so here's the question, and just please answer with one answer. Which of the following is most important for senior living employees to feel engaged at work? Receiving the training needed to perform their job well, having good friends at work, receiving recognition and praise for a job well done, fair pay and benefits, or getting useful coaching and feedback to do their job better?
Great. We have about half of the folks have voted. Right now, receiving recognition is in the lead.
Okay.
And we'll give it just a few more seconds. Okay. Last chance to put in your vote. We're going to close the poll. Okay. The poll is closed, and the winners are. So top one was receiving recognition and praise for a job well done at 50%. Second was getting useful coaching and feedback to do a better job at 38%. And receiving training needed to perform the job well was 12%. Having good friends at work and fair pay and benefits were at 0%.
Okay, awesome. Well, actually all 5 of these items are on our employee engagement survey, and they've all been shown at one level or another to relate to employee engagement and to drive engagement. But for those of you who selected 1, 3, and 5, that's awesome, because these 3 are clearly stronger drivers of engagement than the other 2. Now, the one that received the top number of votes, receiving recognition and praise for a job well done, is in fact what we see most often is not only the top driver of employee engagement in senior living communities, and by the way, all of our work is in senior living, so that's all of our data is related directly to field employees in senior living communities. So not only is that the key driver, it is often the lowest scoring item on our survey. So employees are asking for this, and many feel that they're not getting it. So it's very important to have some ideas, some simple ways you can implement recognition and praise within your communities. But let's talk about Dr. Jack Wiley's RESPECT model. So Dr. Jack Wiley, he has a doctoral degree in organizational psychology, and he has written a book. So this book in the lower right corner of your screen titled RESPECT is Jack Wiley's book. So if you're interested in purchasing the book and reading about his entire model in depth, it's available on Amazon and all your typical outlets for purchasing books. But he has conducted about 3 decades of research with a focus on linking employee survey results to customer satisfaction and financial performance for the U.S. workforce. And he has found, looking back at those results, that the various areas that drive employee engagement fall into 7 areas, which conveniently spell out the word respect. So let's go through these 7 areas. So the R stands for recognition, a pat on the back from your manager or the organization at large. There's also formal types of recognition. The E stands for exciting work, a job that's interesting, challenging, fun. Security, job security, knowing that your job's still going to be there for you in a year or in 5 years. Pay, so some folks like to argue pay is not an important factor in employee engagement. Well, Dr. Jack Wiley says that's not true. Our data show that that's not true either. I mean, you need to put food on the table, right? So pay does play some role in being happy at work. Education, opportunities to develop your skills and to move up the career ladder. Conditions, which is basically all of the conditions around your work environment while you're working, both physical conditions and social conditions. And finally, truth, just wanting frank, honest feedback from your manager, from your leaders. Okay, so there are a few best practice models for employee engagement that I'm going to refer to today, and one of them is Southwest Airlines. Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines, strongly believes that employees come first, customers come second, and shareholders come third. So he is quoted as saying, a motivated employee treats customers well. A customer is happy, so they'll keep coming back, which pleases the shareholder. This is just the way it works. So, I've been in many meetings where the whole discussion was around how do we satisfy our shareholders? How do we raise revenue and lower costs to make the shareholder happy? Well, Herb Kelleher believes that this whole notion needs to be reverse engineered. If you treat your employees well, they will provide amazing customer service, and that will, cause people to want to recommend your communities, and they'll become loyal customers, and they'll tell the world about you, and therefore, revenue and profits will go up, and your shareholders will be happy. So that's Herb's philosophy, and it has worked for Southwest Airlines. And if you want to know if engagement at the employee level really does trickle down, in 2013, Southwest was named the #1 in customer satisfaction by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So yes, the customers are feeling it. Are the shareholders feeling it too? Well, here's a chart that trends 5 years of data looking at the relationship between an engagement index called the Respect Index, which is Dr. Wiley's index of employee engagement, and stock prices for S&P 500 companies. And you could see here on this chart that there's a very tight correspondence between the level of employee engagement at organizations and their actual stock prices. So this is some evidence that yes, that logic trickles down to the actual shareholder, and they become satisfied because of employee engagement measures and the trickle-down effect of that. Okay, so let's go through the 7 areas of respect. The first one is recognition. And this is, as we've already mentioned, one of the most important areas to look at. Dr. Wiley's work also says it's the #1 driver of engagement, as does ours. It often appears as the top driver, regardless of which client we're working with. But we had a client recently who said, okay, this is an area we need to work on, but what do our employees mean when they say they'd like more recognition? What does that mean? So I went to one of their locations and I conducted a focus group with their employees. And the focus group showed us that there are basically 2 kinds of recognition. There's formal and informal recognition. So some examples of informal recognition are the types of things that occur in the moment. Simple gestures like a pat on the back, a spontaneous thank you, being called out for good work by your peers, or a supervisor who notices you're really, really busy and asks a coworker to help out. Those kinds of gestures. Formal recognition would be things more like pay raises, bonuses, an employee of the month program, recognizing employees' birthdays and anniversaries, and providing performance appraisals that are on time to show that you're paying attention and interested in helping them develop. So these discussions taught us that senior living employees truly appreciate both kinds of recognition. But the question is, how do we work that into our busy, busy day? So I already talked a little bit about Southwest Airlines. The 2 best practice models that I look to quite often for ideas and inspiration are the Ritz-Carlton hotels and Southwest Airlines. So basically, they're both hospitality groups. Ritz-Carlton is hospitality on the ground, Southwest hospitality in the air. So how do these best practice models deliver recognition to their employees? Well, let's look at Ritz-Carlton first. First of all, they have this antenna up, radar on approach. They train every single staff member when they go through orientation to identify unique opportunities to meet not only the expressed needs and wishes of their customers, but their unexpressed needs and wishes. So for residents, pay attention to, what is Mrs. Smith's favorite color? Maybe on her birthday, you can decorate the dining space in the color purple to match her favorite color. Maybe Mrs. Johnson loves flowers, so you remember when you can to take her out to the courtyard and look at the gardens. Those kinds of things, just training them to look for those opportunities. And after that training occurs, of course, Ritz-Carlton empowers their employees to do something about it. So staff members know that they're permitted to act on those opportunities in the moment. And they need to know that they are trusted to divert momentarily from normal routine, to go that extra mile when the opportunity is there in meaningful ways. Then Ritz-Carlton shares the wow. Okay, so you've been trained to treat residents well, you've had an opportunity, you've acted on it, and maybe someone saw you do it. So they have weekly staff meetings where employees are encouraged to share their stories and to share examples of coworkers doing great things that they saw throughout the week. So they get formal recognition in these team meetings. And then the other ways they're able to recognize each other is not only by sharing the wow, but Ritz-Carlton will have a variety of recognition programs, one being something they call their first class cards, which is these little cards that everybody gets. They could be handed out peer-to-peer, manager to staff, staff to manager. And it allows them in the moment throughout the day to give each other a pat on the back when they see them doing something special or doing some good work. Now, the lodging industry as a whole tends to run at 60 to 70% turnover, and at Ritz-Carlton, turnover rates are in the low 20s. And many believe it's attributable to the way that these employees are being recognized and engaged. Southwest Airlines is very similar. They focus a lot on storytelling. So Gary Kelly, the CEO of Southwest, he does a weekly shout out to employees that have been recognized. They have a monthly Spirit magazine that features stories of employees who have gone above and beyond. They have a ton of recognition programs. President's Award is a formal banquet they have once a year. This Operation Kicktail is similar to the first class cards. It's a way for Southwest employees to congratulate one another for great work. So you as the leader, you don't have to be the only one doing the recognition and the only one praising employees. You could have it set up where their coworkers are doing it, which is just as or equally motivating for them than hearing from their boss. So then they have, a Star of the Month club, just a bunch of stuff really focusing on employee engagement. So try to imagine how you might implement something along these lines with your employees. Maybe you have weekly stand-up meetings or a monthly employee meeting. Maybe you have a newsletter or something you can use to consistently convey that you understand employees are doing great work. So that's recognition. The second letter in respect is E, and that stands for exciting work. So how do we make sure that our employees are having fun? Well, one of the questions we ask on our survey is, what do you like best about your job? And far and away, the number one answer we receive to this, and it's just an open-ended comment space, is my residents. I love my residents. I love working with them and taking care of them. Well, that means these folks are passionate about caring for seniors. Now, Merit Senior Living HR firm says that 80% of turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. But let's put that aside for now and assume that our staff members are all passionate about caring for seniors. Not only are they passionate about caring, but they're surrounded with other people who are passionate about caring. And humans are social animals. So it's not surprising that they love being with their residents and caring for them. And so, unfortunately, the number one complaint we hear from these same employees is they're not given enough time to spend with their residents. So they say things like they're feeling like they're overworked and understaffed and that they don't have enough time to spend quality moments with their residents. And I know care schedules are tight. I totally understand that. But maybe there's some ideas in there that you can implement to give your employees more opportunities to hang out with their residents, maybe during activities, for example. Or maybe you could, work out a system where once a week every employee gets just 30 minutes to spend some alone time with a resident of their choice. But being with residents is clearly what they love most. So if you could think of ways of helping them do that, that would make their work more fun and exciting. Okay, S stands for security. So security is about knowing your job will be there for you, not only now, but well into the future. We ask employees on our survey how often they think about leaving their community. So isn't it fair for them to wonder how often their employer thinks about leaving them? So they need a sense of security to know that they're in a position that will be there for them as long as they're doing good work. And so there are two ways that you can show your employees a sense of security with their position. Number one is just by showing them a flourishing community. If they see a house with full occupancy, active residents, and high employee retention, they will feel secure in their employment because the corporation, the organization, the community is doing well. And the other way you could provide security is by allowing them to have continuous opportunities to learn and advance up the career ladder. Now, this particular area overlaps a lot with our other E in respect, which is education. So that will be coming up soon. We'll talk a little bit more about it then. So the P stands for pay. So some engagement evangelists say that pay should not be an important factor in retaining employees. As long as they love their job, pay shouldn't matter, right? They're in it for so much more than money. Well, perhaps to a point, but come on, I mean, people need to put food on the table, right? And my best guess is that your frontline direct care workers are either at minimum wage or not much beyond it, which means many of them may be even heading to a second job rather than focusing 100% on their work life in your community or communities. So I understand pay rates are not necessarily something in your control. You know, you might be at a community that's part of a large portfolio and those decisions are made at the corporate level. You may or may not have a lot of control over that. But there might be a few things you can do to address the issue of pay. First of all, make sure the pay rates at your community are on par with similar providers in your local area. I've seen many instances where an entire staff seems to know that the provider a half mile down is paying 50 cents more per hour than you are. I'm not sure how they get that information, but they all seem to have it. So if you know you're being competitive with all of the providers around you in terms of pay to your employees, then you don't have to worry about them leaving for another quarter or another 50 cents an hour. But the other question I pose is, do your employees have other reasons to come to work besides just pay? So if you are embracing a culture of engagement and you're making their work fun and giving them opportunities to shine and be recognized, perhaps 25 cents or 50 cents an hour would not be enough to motivate them to go to another place that isn't as exciting to work at or doesn't reward their employees as much. So, you know, there might be a few things you can do to deal with this issue of pay, but I understand in many cases that's not very much in your control. Okay, so the next E is education. Your employees want to learn and grow. Our survey results say so. Opportunities for growth and advancement often show up in the priority section of our quadrant charts. It's a chart we provide that helps you prioritize your improvement opportunities, and education often will appear as a top priority. So providing your employees with several opportunities to get a good education in your community will go a long way for increasing not only their love of their job, but their sense of security that we talked about earlier. And not only education, but opportunities to advance through the company. So different kinds of education opportunities and also opportunities for your employees to advance. During new employee orientation, when they learn about your vision, your mission, your values, maybe during that point in the process, they're assigned to a buddy for mentoring, someone who's worked in the community for a long time. Then they could go to that person when they have questions. They could confide in that person when they're having difficulties. So all of this could happen right during orientation and then during initial training. And so do you have measurable goals tied to training new employees to make sure that they're all fully trained by a certain time once they begin? Also in services, do you hold or can you hold learning workshops or maybe some brown bag sessions over lunch hour to give employees opportunity to learn new skills or to gather new information? And then there's on-the-fly coaching and feedback, which is one of the items that were on the poll and is, yes, indeed, very important. So supervisors who provide useful coaching and feedback on the fly in the moment, that's very valuable to them to not only learn when they're doing something well, but to receive correction when correction is needed. And then obviously during performance appraisals, provide them on time, provide useful feedback so they can gain new information and learn when they're doing something well, and again, when maybe they can be improving in an area. And then in terms of advancement, if your company does have a job posting system, just make sure that your employees are well aware of that so they know when new job openings come up. And for smaller companies or even for single independently operated communities, there might not be a lot of room for upward growth that way. We have one client that was literally 2 communities that we surveyed, and they said, well, no, we don't have upward opportunities. We're a small company. There's just the 2 communities. Well, maybe there are some lateral opportunities you could open up for your employees, or maybe just the simple act of putting them in charge of a project. A special project in the community would give them new knowledge and make them feel like they're improving and moving up within the company. So just, being creative and thinking about how do I educate on the fly and continuously so they feel like they're learning and growing within the company. Okay, C stands for conditions. Now, yes, it was very convenient for Dr. Wiley to come up with the RESPECT acronym. And it's kind of amazing that all of his findings fit nicely into these 7. But conditions is a big category. I'm sure he was very excited when he looked back and realized he had the acronym RESPECT in front of him. But conditions, again, covers a lot of stuff, so perhaps not quite as neatly as we would hope. But so the C stands for conditions, and as you can see here, it's kind of a catch-all for quite a few areas of work life. And I'm certain we could spend an entire 2-day workshop going over this stuff and sharing ideas. But as you all know, this is a 30-minute webinar. So we're just going to touch on these, and maybe another time we could get together and talk about in more detail some ideas for how to improve in these areas. But there are basically 2 broad types of conditions. There are physical conditions, like having equipment and supplies when you need them, having a good match between your job and your skill set. So nobody wants to feel bored because they're working on something much easier than they're capable of, and nobody wants to feel overwhelmed by having to do work that's way above their head. So having a good match between their job and their skills kind of puts them in that state of flow where they're just moving about and being slightly challenged to the point of interesting. And their workload. So are they being given the right amount of work on a daily basis? So those are physical conditions. And those are all important. Those all also appear on our survey. And the reason I keep bringing up our survey is not to plug Sensite surveys, but to say these general workforce findings that Dr. Wiley has published are very applicable, we have found, to the senior living industry and to your individual communities as well. The other type of conditions are social conditions. So this is the impact people have on an employee's work life. So throughout their day as they're working, are they treated fairly by their management team? Do they feel valued? Do they have opportunities to provide their ideas and opinions? And when they do, are they accepted and valued? Do they feel they are trusted to do the work they have to do, that they have anonymity in making decisions about how their work is done? Do they have a sense of teamwork? This is really important. On our surveys, we often see employees talking about wanting more teamwork with coworkers and also better communication across coworkers, across shifts, from management to staff. So they're just craving this sense of teamwork and communication. And then finally, work-life balance. Are they spending all of their hours at work, or is there a good balance between when they're at work and their personal life so they feel like they have opportunities to de-stress and prepare for the next day of work? So all of these things are covered under the C, which is conditions, and I'm just going to kind of leave you with that for right now rather than trying to go into, a laundry list of ideas on how to address those. So let's look at the final letter in RESPECT. Whoa, what happened there? Which is truth. So truth is about employees wanting not only truthful communication about how they're doing, but also about company matters that affect them. They want communication about their own performance, of course, but they also want honest information about the direction of their team, the direction their department is going in, how the company's doing overall. They want managers who make promises and keep those promises, and general communication about things going on in the organization. So there are different times and opportunities to provide this kind of truth, this kind of communication with your team members. First of all, if you're doing team meetings now, or if you decide to adopt either shift change meetings or weekly team meetings, or maybe just once a month, whatever works for your organization, that's obviously an area where not only you can provide those stories, those wow moments, the opportunity to recognize employees, but you can use that same meeting to provide some notifications and to keep employees updated about what's going on in the company and in the community. Obviously, during reviews, is another opportunity to communicate with your employees, let them know how they're doing, tell them what they're doing well as how they can improve the work that they're doing. If you have an open door policy, obviously folks are walking in and wanting to talk to you. That's another opportunity to provide communication. And then if you want to be able to communicate to everybody all at once, maybe you have a newsletter, maybe you have email blasts, maybe you do texting with your teams. Those are all ways for you to communicate on a regular basis so they really feel like they're being kept in the loop. So hopefully today's webinar answered these 3 questions. Why should I care about employee engagement? Well, because it has a positive impact on retention. Turnover goes down when employees are engaged, and that trickles down into amazing customer service, which has a positive impact on the reputation of your communities and your organization, which hopefully increases profitability. That's why engagement's important. What does it look like? Well, using Dr. Wiley's respect model, employees who are engaged feel recognized, they're excited about the work they're doing, they feel job security, they feel like they're being paid fairly for the work that they do, they feel educated and given opportunities to learn and grow within the organization, they feel that both their physical and their social conditions are good, and they feel truth-rich, as though people are sharing information about things that affect them. How could I engage my employees? Well, hopefully you've heard some good ideas today and something you could take with you, even if not in the exact form it was described, in some way that you can modify it that works for you with your individual teams. So I appreciate your time today, and now if there are any questions, I would be happy to participate in the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Lynn. That was fantastic. We have a couple of questions, and I encourage everyone to go ahead and, if you have any additional questions, to put them in the questions pane on your control panel. The first question we got was, are there any simple changes I can do to make a difference?
Well, of course, there are some resources. There are some resources out there that you could tap into, that if you decided, for example, you wanted to start allowing not only yourself but your coworkers to give each other a pat on the back, and you think it sounds like fun to be able to hand out like those first class cards with Ritz-Carlton, I know that there are resources out there that would allow you to simply go online and make a simple purchase of these, shining star cards or first class cards. I think that's a really simple way of doing it. As a matter of fact, Senior Living Smart has a partner, Certifigift. Am I saying that right, Andrea?
Yep, Certifigift, yep.
Certifigift. It's an entire website dedicated to providing you with templates or simple resources you can purchase at a fairly low cost to implement something like the first class card, things like that. And I also know that another partner for Senior Living Smart, Donna Cutting, she's with Red Carpet Learning. She's done a webinar where her handout was called 21 Days of Thank You. And I'm sure you'd find it on the Senior Living Smart website, where it's just 21 different ideas on how to thank your employees every day in ways that are simple and easy to implement.
Yeah, that's a great resource, and it's in the webinar section of the Senior Living Smart website. Another question is, you had mentioned that your survey asks if they have good friends at work. But why should you ask that?
That question comes up a lot. So we have a survey that is a template for employee engagement, but we do allow our clients to customize that survey to match their individual needs and preferences. And oftentimes when we're going through that initial discussion, a question mark is written next to that item on the survey. Like, why are we asking this? Well, first of all, it stems from Gallup research. They have the Q12, and one of their items is, I have a best friend at work. And we changed ours. Well, first of all, their question's copywritten, so we can't use it. But ours is, I have good friends at work. And it is an important driver, and many, many years of research has showed that. So think about wanting recognition, thinking about needing someone to confide in or to ask questions to when your boss is not directly available. having good friends at work allows you to receive all of those things on a more regular basis. And research has shown that if you have a best friend at work or good friends at work, they feel more recognized, they feel more educated, and they feel like they have better communication and teamwork among their coworkers. And, that really makes sense. So, just providing your team with the occasional social opportunity, because then the question becomes, well, what if my team members aren't friends with each other? What if they're just getting by and they're not really getting along that well? Well, all you could really do is encourage social interaction by maybe having, parties every once in a while, maybe like a summer barbecue where they could all get together and eat a cheeseburger, or do whatever you can to give them opportunities outside of work to interact with one another.
Great. Another question came in. The E in excited, it says, how do you make a job of a CNA fun?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And obviously we had to look at not only our survey results, but what employees were telling us. And, as I've said, for the most part, is to, what we really like to do for our clients is to go in and ask at that point. So if you know that your employees are craving exciting work and your survey results or just some informal feedback you've gotten is suggesting that's not the case, that they're not having fun, well, we have a 5-step process we go through after the results are in to help clients write action plans and implement their improvement ideas. And one of those steps is to get additional feedback from your employees. So if we have employee survey results and we know an area needs to be worked on, just like we did for that one client that didn't understand what recognition was for their employees, we go in and follow up and we do feedback sessions and say, okay, so you've said you need this, but we need to know exactly what that looks like. We need to know your help. We need to get your help in knowing what your ideas and opinions are for how to improve in this area. And so that's where we get our best feedback. But what we see on the survey is really what I've said already, is they just really enjoy time with their residents. And they also want to feel like there's good teamwork among coworkers. So if they feel like they're busting their butt to work, and then they look, and in the other wing, there are people just hanging around doing nothing because that's not my resident, that's your resident, just setting up a community-wide team sort of mentality where everyone pitches in to help one another, that will avoid them feeling overworked and give them more opportunities to enjoy what they're doing and not feel stressed out about it. And so if you're thinking, well, how am I going to do a feedback session with my employees? I already did the survey and told them it was anonymous. And now I'm going to go in and face-to-face ask them for this feedback that they just gave privately on a survey. Well, let me tell you, it's very different to have an employee rate you on a survey than it is to say, you know what, we got these results and this area really needs to be worked on. We want to help improve in this area so you can have a better work experience. We want to get just some feedback from you. Let's not point fingers, let's not name names, but let's just talk about what this looks like to you when that area is going well and what we might be able to do. And we even have an exercise you can do if you don't think employees will be honest with you about it, where you could actually leave the room and recruit a few other team members to collect the information you need, and then you come back in later and receive all that information so it's still anonymous. So those are some of the things that we do and understand.
Terrific. There's one last question. What letter would you focus on first?
R, which is recognition. Now, you may already have some of the other things going on, like in terms of education. You're obviously training all your people, and you're giving them opportunities to occasionally learn new things on the job through coaching and feedback. But I would focus on recognition first because, I mean, it's really kind of a simple thing to do. If you're not accustomed to provide recognition on a regular basis, it might seem like something out of the ordinary that you have to really work hard at. But once you have just a couple of ideas implemented, it becomes very natural, and it really changes the culture in a positive way to provide everyone with a couple ways of receiving and providing recognition to one another. So not only are there some really simple ideas out there for being better at recognizing employees, it's also, as I mentioned, the key driver. So I would focus on recognition first, and that really, it seems to impact some of the other areas almost automatically.
That's great. And Lynn, I actually have a question. Is this something that has to come from the corporate office, or is it something that the individual at the community level can be successful at?
Well, I would say it could come from either, and I suppose that is a question that would be handled individually, company by company. I know there are different corporate philosophies about how much freedom directors can have in the way they handle things and their policies. And, you know, we have one client where at the corporate level, they're really emphasizing a culture of engagement. But we have other clients where the directors have full reign to just sort of put things in place as long as it doesn't affect, you know, their numbers, if they want to do something to give their employees a better experience. So we've seen all varieties of how that goes down. We have one client, though, where at the corporate level, they're really pushing a culture of engagement, and they have each of their directors report in a weekly meeting how many ways they've recognized their employees during the week. They actually have goals set for that. So that's an example of it coming from the corporate office, but I think it could be handled in a variety of ways depending on your company and what's allowed.
Great. Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. If you have any other questions, you can contact Lynn directly at lynn@sensitesurveys.com. Also today, once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. We'll also be sending you out a follow-up email within 24 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, plus a copy of all the slides and the 2 handouts that are available right now to download. Thank you all so much for joining us. This was an excellent webinar, and I hope you have some great ideas to bring back to your community. And just a reminder, our next webinar, Senior Living CRMs, Are You Goldilocks or Cinderella? Will be Tuesday, July 19th at 1. And send that over to your salespeople and let them know. And again, thank you all. And thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.